So our next speaker is Fabien. So I'm having a hard time pronouncing your last name, Hochstrasse.
Hochstrasse.
Hochstrasse, exactly. From Swisscom, we talk a lot about PGI and also migrating from different platforms, etc. And what Fabien and his team has done is to migrate from a different PGI platform into EJBCA, so which is a very nice and interesting project technically. So, there you go.
Good. So you hear me okay? So hello. So my name is Fabien, as I said, and I will show you how we successfully migrated from RSA to EJBCA. I'm working for Swisscom, as I said, so it's the largest IT telecom company in Switzerland. They do everything from internet access, mobile communication, TV, cloud, IoT, and whatnot. But today, I will do it like this. Yes. So today I will talk about our PKI. So it was the first one in Switzerland since 2005. The current root is Swisscom root CA2, and it is trusted by all your operating systems and browsers. It is IDAS and CertS certified. CertS is the kind of the Swiss IDAS. We have 8 different issuing CAs, and we issue around 15,000 certificates per month. And the only interface used to access the CA is CMP, so that's the one we use. And we only issue certificates to Swisscom internal services. And we have 3 of them, so it's not a lot of customers, but they're still producing a lot of certificates. So we have the all-in signing service. That's a signing service that's online, that you can just send a hash to it, and you get the signature back and the certificate with it. We also do on-demand, so like we saw yesterday. So this is something that the sign server will soon support. We do that already, so we don't use sign server. We have mobile ID. That's a 2-factor authentication method using a special applet on the SIM card. So the keys are generated on the SIM card, so it's kind of an HSM. And we use digital signature in the authentication process. And for that, we need certificates, and that's where we're using this PKI. And we have secure email. Yeah, you know what it is. So you just encrypt and sign mails. So today I will talk about 4 things. So the goals we had for this migration, how we migrated the data, a few things we did on the infrastructure, and then a few tips and tricks. I'm sorry, this is not the latest presentation I have, so I don't remember exactly how it looks like. So we will see. So yeah, first the goals. So that's how the infrastructure was before we migrated. So we have 2 locations. Everything is on-premise. We don't use any cloud. We have HSMs. We use the Gemalto or SafeNet Luna SA appliances. We had 2 different kind of CA servers. I was lying at the beginning. We have RSA and EJBCA Community Edition, both of them. And each of those servers are using a different kind of data store. So that's also a challenge for the migration, because we have to do things differently for each of them. So RSA was using an LDAP directory and EJBCA MariaDB database. We are publishing the certificates and CRLs to an LDAP server, and we use the RSA validation manager as OCSP responder. As you see here, it's not perfectly symmetric, and I mean that's bad for geo-redundancy, and that's something we wanted to fix also with this migration. So we also improved the infrastructure, and that's how it looks like now. So both sides are the same. We still have the same HSMs. We now have only one CA software. It's EJBCA Enterprise Edition, geo-redundant. We use a MariaDB Galera cluster to store the databases, both the CA and OCSP databases. For OCSP, we're also using EJBCA. And we still have the same LDAP server. And finally, the goals that we had. So we wanted to migrate. So of course, the keys have to stay the same in the CA. So we didn't want to recertify everything. It was a lot of work to do it, so we wanted to keep that. That's the goal of a migration. We wanted to be able to revoke the certificates issued on the old infrastructure, of course. We wanted the CRL to be valid and contain everything which should be revoked. We wanted the CRL to continue the numbering and not start from 1 again. And the new certificates must match all the documents that we have. And for the infrastructure, we wanted to be able to do an automated installation of EJBCA to have the setup fully geo-redundant. And we wanted to keep the surrounding systems like the HSMs or the publishing LDAP unchanged, so wanted to keep as much as possible. And we wanted the migration to be transparent for the customers, so no change on the CMP interface. So good, now we can dive into the main topic, so the data migration. So at the beginning, we had no idea how to do that. In the end, we managed to find a way with the help of PrimeKey, and I will show you now what you need to do in case you have the same challenge. So let's say you installed a new EJBCA server, it's data store, you love it, it's great, it's shiny, it's beautiful, but for now it's empty. So you'll need to do something to put some data on it. So first, you will need to import the CA and keys. Yeah, the keys are on the HSM, but you need to tell EJBCA where to find those keys and how to identify them. Then you will need to create the certificate and identity profiles for the migration. The profiles in EJBCA, for those who don't know, are kind of certificate templates. So you say how long the certificate should be valid, which attributes are allowed in the distinguished name, how to publish them, and stuff like that. Then you'll need to export the certificates and the CRLs from the original data store. So for RSA, it was an LDAP directory, and for EJBCA, it was a MariaDB database. So here, the process is different for each CS software you're migrating from. And then you will import first the certificates that you just exported, and then the CRLs. Then you will need to revoke the certificates missing from the CRL. This might seem crazy, but I mean, it can happen. I will tell you on the next slides why. And then you validate the process. You make sure that you migrated everything. And finally, you repeat. That's the great thing about this process. So you can do it in multiple steps. And each time you do it, it's faster. Because you do it, the first time you do it, it's really slow. Because you have to migrate, I don't know, 10, 15, 20 years of data. And then you can repeat the exact same step. Without change, you just do exactly what you did. But this time, you just migrate the difference that happened during those 2 weeks. We call that delta when we're talking about it. And yeah, every time is faster. You also get more used to the migration process. And then the day of the migration itself, you just do that one more time, maybe with just 1 day of delta, and it's really fast and really easy to do. So yeah, first import the CA and keys. So yes, the EJBCA is using the Sun PKCS 11 library provided by Java. And this requires the certificates to be on the HSM. This is, I mean, not required for a security reason, because certificate is public information, so you don't need them on the HSM. But EJBCA requires that to be able to find them. This was not required by RSA, so we didn't have them on the HSM. So what we did is that we created dummy certificates there. We just did self-signed certificate using the keys on the HSM, and we gave them a label. And with that, EJBCA is then able to find them, because you give the label to EJBCA, it finds the certificate, and then it finds the key related to the certificate on the HSM. Then we need to import the root CA. So now I have a few commands in my slide. I mean, you don't need to remember them. It's just here as a reference in case you will do the same migration. So you will import the root CA using the EJBCA command line. And then each issuing CA, and you will give all the parameters you need for EJBCA to find them on the HSM. And that's an example of the configuration file you need. Then you need to create the certificate and identity profile. So that's when you migrate the certificates, you have to assign them to a profile. And it must match the profile definition. If it doesn't, EJBCA refuses to import it. So for the migration, you will create really permissive profiles that allow a lot of things, because I mean, in the years, mistakes happens, should not, but it does. And even if the certificate is kind of strange or wrong, it can be revoked immediately, but it was still issued. It must still be on the CRL, so you still need to migrate it. Regulations change, so you have different kind of things you must have or not in the certificate. So you will need to allow a lot of things on those profiles so that you can import all the certificates that you issued in the last years. So yeah, here I have a few examples. So the most common problem was the DN attributes. Then you also need to allow backdated revocation on those, because that will be needed to revoke the certificate missing from the CRL. And because those profiles are so permissive, you will just use them for the migration, but you will never use them to issue new certificates. You will just create a different one. we created one migration profile for each issuing CA we have. And we still have those profiles there. We don't use them anymore, but they are still here. The certificates are referencing them, but it doesn't hurt. Then you need to export the certificates and the CRLs. So for that, there is no silver bullet. You will have to read the original data store and find a way to export all the data yourself. PrimeKey can help you. They helped us, so I'm sure they can help you as well. And when you will export those, you will export them as files, which means they are now in a normalized form. So it doesn't matter what kind of data store was used before. Now you just have files. So this makes the next steps much easier, because it doesn't matter what was used before. And it's good to group them by directories which have a logical link together. For example, one directory for each issuing CA, because of the next step, which is the import. And here you will use the EJBCA CLI again, and you will use the command import cert_dir, which import a certificate directory. And all the certificates in this directory will be assigned to the same profile. So that's why it's good to group them with however you want, but something which makes sense for you. So in our case, it was for each issuer. And you will have problems. I mean, we had a lot of them, but you can just fix them and repeat again, because the import script command is smart, and it will not try to import twice the same certificate. So you don't need to worry about that, and that's also what makes all this migration process repeatable. So what kind of problem can you have? The biggest one we had was just distinguished name or subject name attributes not allowed on the profile. So you just need to go on the admin UI, allow it, and then try again, and it works. So easy. You can have the same for the key size. We had a few, I think, I don't remember exactly which one, but unknown DN attributes. So they were not available on the web UI. So we couldn't tell the EJBCA, yes, it's fine, you can do it. So we had to add it in some configuration file, recompile EJBCA, and then it was there on the admin UI. A stupid one was email addresses without @sign. Doesn't make real sense for email addresses, but RSA was doing bad validation, so we had such certificates. Even if they were revoked, as I said, we have to migrate them. We have a trusted and certified PKI, so we cannot just forget about them. And this check is hard-coded in EJBCA, so we had to edit the code, compile again, and import it. So that's a great thing with open source. You have a problem, you can fix it yourself. And yeah, if you have any other problem, just try to fix it yourself or ask PrimeKey. They know better than you how to fix it. So, but there is always a way. That's the thing. You can always fix the problem. Once all the certificates are migrated, you will need to import the CRLs, because it's not written in the certificate if it's revoked or not. This is in the CRL. So far, you imported all your certificates. And from the EJBCA point of view, they are all valid. So now you need to tell EJBCA which one are revoked. So you do that by importing the CRL. And this will also update the CRL number, so you don't need to worry about that. The next one generated will just have a higher number than the one you just imported. It's important to do that after you imported all the certificates, because if you don't, it will create a dummy entry in the database with just the serial number and the revocation date and the reason, but then you don't have any other metadata. So if you want to find something another day, you cannot. And then when you try to import the certificate again, it's already in the database, so it's not imported. So import first all the certificates and then the CRLs. Then the strange step. So yeah, revoke the certificates missing from the CRL. This can happen because, for example, expired certificates are not valid anymore anyway, so they don't need to be on the CRL. But we wanted to have a consistent database, so we still wanted to mark them as revoked, even if we don't care anymore, really. But it was also easier for the validation, which is the next step, that we can really compare, make sure that all the certificates are really being imported with the right metadata. And for that, again, there is no silver bullet. You have to read the original data store and compare it with the CRL. And then you can revoke them using, this time, the client toolbox of EJBCA, not the CLI. It's another command line tool, but you can use that for that. And here, the backdated revocation must be allowed on the profile, otherwise it doesn't work. So if you need to do something similar, I published a script on GitHub to compare the LDIF dump of the RSA LDAP directory and the CRL file, and it will just revoke the certificate for you. So feel free to use it. Yeah, so it lets you take pictures if you want to, but I think the slides will be online later anyway, so you always can have the reference later if you need to. And then for the validation, the last step, what do you need to validate? You need to make sure that you migrated everything and that everything is the same. To check that on EJBCA, you can just use SQL, because it's a database, so you can just do all the kind of statistics or checks you want. But for RSA, which was an LDAP directory, we had to write a custom script to summarize the content of the data store. I also have a script for that, but I didn't publish it on GitHub because it was too, let's say, there are some hard-coded values and stuff like that. But if you need it, you can write me an email. I will send it to you. Good, so now we migrated everything. All the data is there, that's good. So now we can talk about some things we did in the infrastructure. Yeah, sorry, I don't remember how the slides are, so this one I removed it. So I wanted to recap this one again. So that's what we have. We still have the HSMs, the EJBCA servers, the Galera cluster, the LDAP publisher, and the OCSP responders. Just one slide about Galera for those who don't know what it is. So it's a multi-master clustering technology for MySQL and MariaDB. It's a great one. It's the best one I've used so far, so I really encourage you to use it. And any write you do on any of the nodes gets replicated on the others, so that's great. But you need to tell EJBCA to which one you should write, right? So if you have an issue or a maintenance on the node that EJBCA is using, then EJBCA cannot talk to the cluster anymore. So it's good to put something in front of it. We use MaxScale. That's an SQL proxy developed by MariaDB, which is made for that, for Galera. But you can also use HA proxy or any layer 4 load balancing software or appliance that you want. Then yes, so we have this great Galera cluster, but it also means that we have only one set, so one database. So each location is using the same database, so they are using the same data. And sometimes you want each server to do something the same, but with a small difference. And for example, for the publishing of the certificates, we want to publish the certificates on the local location, kind of. So we don't want to cross the border, because the idea in our setup is that one location can disappear and the other one continues working without problem. So to do that, we just use names in the database. So when they query it, they just both get the same name, but then they translate it to a different IP address using host file or DNS. And then they can publish their certificates to their local LDAP, and then the master-master replication of the LDAP takes care of the rest. So we still have the same data on both locations, and everything is going fine. Still on the LDAP topic, for the publishing, that's the structure we use. So we have one domain component for each issuing CA, and we have all the certificates below it. Each certificate is referenced by their serial number, except the CA certificate and the OCSP responder certificate, which are called by name. And we also have custom LDAP flags or attributes that we publish, and some that we don't want to publish. And this is by default not what EJBCA is doing. So we had to find a way to do that. And what we did is that we created our own publisher. So we wrote a bit of Java code, included that into the application, compiled it, made it available on the web UI, and then we can just use it on the UI, but we use our code. So that's great. Open source again, great thing. You can just do whatever you want. Then for the OCSP publishing, so yeah, now we have two databases on the MariaDB cluster. We have the CA database and the OCSP database. All the CA servers are using the same CA database, and all the OCSP servers are using the same OCSP database. And the CA must tell the OCSP responder if a certificate is revoked or not. So the way we decided to do it, there are multiple ways to do it, but we're thinking, okay, what's the common point of all the OCSP responders? The database. So we told the EJBCA, so the CA is in fact using two different databases. The CA database to perform his work, and the OCSP database just to publish certificates, to let the OCSP responder know that some certificates are revoked. Then the key renewal of the OCSP signer. That's a great feature of EJBCA that we didn't have on RSA, so we don't need to worry about renewing the certificates of the OCSP responder. It's just done automatically. But for that, we need a communication between the CA and the OCSP responder, peer system or internal key binding. But this time, we decided to do the same concept as we did for to publish the LDAP certificate. So we again used the name, and then it was translated to a different IP address for each CS server. I don't know if we see it. Oh, yes, we see it. Great. So we see that even if the name used is the same, the TLS certificate that the CS sees is different on each location. And then, yes, reverse proxy. So that's the last infrastructure-related thing I want to talk about. I guess that you all have some reverse proxy or load balancer in front of your CAs. And it's a great thing because you can hide what's behind it. So this helps to make the migration transparent for the customers. So we could migrate from one to the other. And what we can also do is some URL rewriting if we need to. So we can really make that completely transparent for the customer. They continue to use the CMP interface as they were before, and then we can translate it to something different in the backend. Tips and tricks. Now, to be honest, I don't remember the slides and in which order they are. So software, that's the software suite we use. So we have Red Hat 7, we have Java 8, EJBCA 6.9, and JBoss Enterprise 7. Those are the most important ones. Then this slide, I skip it, and I go to this one. One thing, sorry to say that, I love EJBCA, but one thing I don't like in EJBCA is the installation process. So you have to compile the code and then use some ant commands. Ant is the brother, let's say the Java brother of the make command. And it's doing some magic things. It works, it's great. But personally, I don't like magic because if one day it doesn't work, and then I have to fix it, but I don't know how it works. So it required a bit of reverse engineering and asking a few questions to PrimeKey, but we did that differently. So what we do is that we build EJBCA on a development server with the configuration settings we want, and then we put that into an RPM package that we can then install on the servers. And this is great because it's easier to do, it's easier to automate. It has a better versioning, so we know exactly what we have on each server. We don't need to compare the files or so. We can just ask Yum. And it's also great for custom patches. So for example, we have this custom LDAP publisher, so it's included in the package. But there are a few problems because it's not the way it was designed to be used. So one problem is that the configuration files of EJBCA are part of the compiled Java archive. And we have different configuration settings in different environments. So what we had to do, unfortunately, was to create different packages for that. But on each location, we have the same package. But in each environment, so testing or production, we have a different package. I published the spec file, or a simplified version of the spec file we used to build the RPM file on GitHub as well. So in case you want to do that, you can have a look. It's a simplified version because this one doesn't support the, let's say, multi-environment package stuff. It's just to create one simple package. And one other thing that we lost, now that we are not using the ant commands anymore, is that we have to do the initial bootstrap ourselves, because that's done by the ant install command, I guess. So that's exactly what the bootstrap is doing. So if you need to do it, you do that once on the first EJBCA node you install, and that's it. So you create the management CA, the superadmin user and its key store, and an SSL certificate for JBoss to be able to do the client authentication to the admin interface. And once you've done that, stuff are written in the database, and you can just, then for the next node you install, you can just have the OS installed. That's how we do it. So we just have the OS installed. We need to issue an SSL certificate. We need to have a database user ready, and then we just run Puppet, and a few minutes later we have a working server with JBoss, EJBCA, and everything configured without having to do anything manual. So we know that it's done correctly because, I mean, personally, when I do something manually, I always do mistakes. I forget some checkbox or whatever. This one, I skip it as well. And it's too bad. I changed this slide with nice pictures and things, and now you have boring text. But yeah, the facts are still the same. So we did this migration, just me and one of my colleagues. In 8 months, we migrated 2 environments, so production and pre-production. During those 8 months, it was, let's say, from the initial analysis, how can we migrate up to the migration date, including all the automation, including learning and installing and deploying Galera and all this kind of stuff. So, I mean, if you need to do it one day, it's not that hard. So I really recommend you to do this migration if you're not using EJBCA now. We have a few servers, yes, and we did overall 3 workshops with PrimeKey, one to understand how to do the migration, one to test the migration process, and the last one to migrate the test environment. But we migrated the productive environment all by ourselves. We did that during the night. PrimeKey was available in case of issue, but we didn't have any problem. And we did that with 1 hour downtime. I mean, 1 hour downtime can seem long or short, it depends on your SLA. For us, it was okay to have 1 hour downtime, but I'm sure we could have reduced it with a bit more challenges, like, for example, how can we do the validation step if we get certificates being issued during the migration phase? So then it's harder to check if the numbers are matching or not, or if somebody wants to revoke a certificate which is not migrated yet. So I'm sure it's possible to do it with almost no or even no downtime, but for us it was not a requirement, so we take the easy way. And that's already it. So thank you for your attention, and I'm available if you have any question. And mostly, I tell again, if you don't use EJBCA yet and you use something else, please migrate. It's easy. Trust me.
Thank you kindly for your presentation and also for your suggestions what and how we could improve in the product. It's something that we really cherish to hear from colleagues that are using our products, what you think we should do better. That's how we improve. Anybody questions, please raise your hand so I can.
So you mentioned approximately 1 hour of downtime. I assume that's just for the issuing CAs and the directories were up the entire time, or did you bring everything down?
So during this time, so this was the CA migration. So the OCSP responders were still working, but during this time it was not possible to issue or revoke certificates.
Okay, thank you.
And yeah, something I also didn't say is that we have 2 different CA softwares, and we did both migration 2 different days. So we migrated one of them one day and the other one the other day, but the sum of the downtime was 1 hour.
So one question I have was that since you have, an audited CA, what did auditors think, or how were they involved in the process before or after, things like that?
I think we had the audit just 1 month before the migration, so we will see that during the next audit.
Ouch.
No, it will be fine. We think it will be good.
So my next question, well, one thing that I didn't see in your slide was the motivation from switching. Of course, the EJBCA is great, etc., but you don't kind of spend the time or money just by.
Yeah, so as you all know, RSA is dropping support for their software, so we had to change. We were not loving it, but the easy way is to just keep using it. But this was a hard deadline that we had to match, so we had to change. And why EJBCA? We were already using the community edition before, and it was working great, so we decided to go now for real enterprise with EJBCA.
More questions? Am I seeing there? No?
Okay, then I have one last question myself. You mentioned that you're managing your deployments, etc., with the Puppet.
Yep.
And is that for having it easily reproducible and consistent? And how long did it take you to work out the Puppet stuff? Or maybe you had that already from the old system?
So we are using Puppet to manage everything, but the EJBCA and JBoss part, this had to be written because we didn't use that before. And I don't remember the time it took, but it was part of those 8 months from start to finish to automate all that.
Okay, yeah, so it was. We have a question in the back.
You have used your EJBCA with your own implementation on a VM separate from an appliance. If you take this example and you actually move from RSA to an appliance for a PKI appliance, maybe that's also for the PrimeKey guys, the process wouldn't be the same, is it?
So I've never used the appliance, but as long as you have access to the command line interface, I would say the process would be the same.
Should be the same. And second is, what kind of HSM was it?
It was the SafeNet, Gemalto, or whoever bought this company now, but the Luna ESA appliances.
It's an appliance, okay.
Yeah, I would say that in general, it's the same. We have the command line interface on the appliance as well. The thing, of course, is the HSM. So in order to use a Luna SA appliance with an PGI appliance, you would have to kind of wait for the next version that Martin mentioned that will include support for external HSMs. When with that, it would be easy except for one thing, which is your custom LDAP publisher. So in the appliance, it's more of a lockdown, say, appliance experience. So it's not supported out of the box as it is today to put your own Java code on there. So it depends. Yeah, if you would have slightly simpler setup without a custom publisher, it would be possible. But so we'll see about, I think Mike has been asked this question or support regarding other custom publishers because it's a rather convenient and popular feature actually.
Just because we don't have another question, it's not directly to you, but it's more directly to Thomas. So if you were to use an appliance, and that appliance will have their own HSM, it wasn't an external HSM, you'll have a problem migrating the keys altogether.
Yes.
And with the number of keys that you have, you wouldn't actually be able to use only one appliance, right? So how will that be in that case? I'm just trying to understand what kind of a process you put in place. Because you actually, the key material, which is the most important, you didn't transfer it. You transfer only public information at the end of the day. So if you were to move it to an appliance, you have to move the key material. And that will be a totally different process.
It might be totally impossible.
That's why I'm
HSM,
asking
that
to
you
see.
don't move the keys, so yeah.
Yeah, correct. So if the key material is not what's called exportable, then it's virtually impossible. Or in theory, it's impossible because that's the design of the HSMs, of course. So.
For you who are not geeks, maybe it's like if you buy a Mercedes car and you want to put a BMW engine into it. Might be not trivial questions. I'm not seeing an update here. If I'm missing any questions, please raise your hands. Otherwise, we'll reconvene for the coffee first.
Okay. Then we have our last coffee break.
Yeah. But first, let's have an applause for Fabien. Thank you very much.